الحمد لله رب العالمين. الحمد لله رب السماوات ورب الأرض رب العالمين، وله الكبرياء في السماوات والأرض وهو العزيز الحكيم. الحمد لله الذي بنعمته تتم الصالحات. ربنا لك الحمد حتى ترضى، ولك الحمد إذا رضيت، ولك الحمد بعد الرضا. صل اللهم وسلم وبارك على سيد الأولين والآخرين محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له الملك الحق المبين، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله وصفيه من خلقه وخليله وأمين على وحيه. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله ولتنظر نفس ما قدمت لغد واتقوا الله إن الله خبير بما تعملون. My dear respected brothers and sisters in Islam, all praise and glory and thanks are due to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the verses that we recite every Friday, all you who believe, be mindful of Allah as is His due. Taqullah haqqa tuqatih. The word taqwa, there is hardly any translation for it, but it is a very loaded word that encapsulates or includes all aspects of our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Loving Allah as is His due, fearing Allah as is His due, trusting Allah. All of these are included in the word taqwa. Taqullaha haqqa tuqatih. So it's a struggle all your life to try to reach that level, and you keep doing this until you meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And no one should ever feel that you are there, or your iman is good enough, or your ibadat are good enough, or your akhlaq are good enough. No matter how good they are, you always need to push your limits and to try to move to the next level so that you meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the best of shapes. And in the second verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, تَقُوا اللَّهَ وَلْتَنْظُرْ نَفْسٌ مَا قَدَّمَتْ لِغَدٍ. Always check what you have saved and invested with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what you have sent to forward. Because the moment we leave this life, that's the only thing that matters. The moment we leave this life, the only thing that matters is what you invested and saved with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Everything else is not yours anymore. Everything else is behind you. Is going to be distributed among others. But for you, the only thing that matters is what you invested and saved with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So always when you wake up in the morning, ask yourself and challenge yourself to do something more, to do something different, to show Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala something better from you. And then when you go to sleep, hold yourself accountable. What is it that you have invested? Check your account with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. My dear respected brother and sister in Islam, every now and then we hear that a young Muslim, mainly young Muslim boy or man, dies suddenly. People in their 20s, their late 20s, etc. And in the last couple of weeks we had there are few cases. In the last 2 weeks there are 3 cases around us and 3 other cases also in the larger community. Now we may say this is their time, that's ajal. إِذَا جَاءَ أَجَلُهُمْ لَا يَسْتَأْخِرُونَ سَاعَةً وَلَا يَسْتَقْدِمُونَ. Of course we pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to shower them with His mercy. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive them and accept them, inshallah. But in all parts of the world, when just one person dies at a young age suddenly, that's very suspicious. And in most parts of the world, it is investigated. Because people check for suicide, check for overdose, check for murder. That's what the norm in all parts of the world. And that's what we should do, especially when it becomes like a trend, or it becomes like phenomena like this. I don't know these people, and I'm not talking about them specifically. I'm talking about this phenomenon because it has been happening, and we were slipping it under the rug, and we are in a state of denial. We are not facing it. So it is about time to address this issue and the bigger issue of building and managing families and parenting, the relationship between parents and children. Second phenomenon that also came to my attention is that the rate of divorce in our community is increasing. And that also should be alarming, should ring an alarm. And also, I am aware of many cases of families that did not divorce, but they are dysfunctional, that it's not working. And of course, again, we continue to remain in a state of denial, and again, it is about time to address these issues, and that's what brought the point that we need to talk about the larger issue of building and managing families and parenting. We did this before, been like several, probably a few years ago, but وَذَكِّرْ فَإِنَّ الذِّكْرَ تَنْفَعُ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. We just need to be reminded. We have done a series about the family from the inception, the whole cycle, into parenting, etc. Now there are two facts that we need to address. We need to talk about them frankly before we get into what should be done. One is that all the problems that exist in this society exist in our community. Make no mistake about it. Let's forget about this. Let's not fool ourselves. It's not because we are hiding these, it doesn't mean that they're not happening. All the problems that are there in societies, that you hear about them, they exist in our community. With a greater degree or less degree or the same degree, that's a detail. The second fact that we need to address is that there are serious problems within the families in our communities, both in spousal relationship and the relationship between parents and children. Very serious. And we can no longer deny them or ignore them. And one word about this issue of relationship with children, especially as they grow up, about the phenomena that I mentioned, and then we talk about the larger issue. Please make sure that there is always open communication with your children. Make sure that you make the house safe place for them to express their opinion, their feelings, to share with you their problems and their mistakes. Because if you don't offer that in the house, in the family, they're going to look for it elsewhere. And then you have only yourself to blame. They're going to look for alternatives for this. So make the house a safe place for the child to be themselves, to express their feelings, their opinions, their problems, share with you their problems, their mistakes, their challenges, because that's the best way you can manage things and you can fix them. Once that's not happening, children will go and look for alternative. And a lot of time that's where the problem happens. They will find bad company, or they go online to find answers to those questions and to find people who have the same problem to talk to find somebody to talk to. And that's a failure in the family and a failure in the community in providing mentors, big brothers and big sisters for those children as they go through those transitions. So they don't find anybody to talk to at home, and then there is nobody in the community they can talk to. And that's where the problem starts, when they start looking for alternatives, answers to their questions and solutions to their problems. I know that we are at different stages in life, in the life cycle. Some of us are young, some of us are yet to build a family, some of us are grandparents, etc. I hope that what we're going to discuss will be beneficial to all of us, inshallah. The first step in raising a child is choosing spouse. The first step in successfully raising your child is the good selection of your spouse. Because if that step is not done right, then there is hardly anything you can do to fix it. You can't raise a child successfully in a dysfunctional family. Can't happen. If it happens, it's very exceptions. It's not the norm. So building a family is the first step, and that's what we're going to focus on today, inshallah. And we'll see how far we can go, and then we address the issue of parenting. Especially the major problem in our community is children when they become teenagers and when they become young adults. That transition is failing in the large percentage of family fail in that transition. They may succeed as the child is young, but then when they grow up and they transition to become young adult and teenager, that's where things get tense, and that's where the disconnection happens. So building a family, this is probably the most critical decision that you make in your life, that a person can make in his or her life, choosing a spouse. It may set you for success, it may, and happiness, and may set you up for failure and suffering. The two criteria that we should focus on, whether you are going to choose a spouse or you're going to help your child choosing a spouse, etc., is maturity and compatibility. Maturity and compatibility. Child has to be, the one who's going to get married should be mature. And maturity has nothing to do with age. People can mature before 20s, and people can maybe immature even in their 30s. So maturity, someone is stable, knows what they want to do in life, they have clear priorities, clear sets of values and principles, coherent personality, then they can build that relationship. But if someone is still shaky, there is no point. You cannot run a family. It's a very challenging task. So make sure that those who are get married, they are mature and they are compatible. They are compatible, meaning their personalities, because marriage is basically choosing someone so that your happiness and success will depend on the other side, on your partner, on your spouse. So compatibility is extremely important. You may have two people, they are very good, but they're not compatible. Each one of them is very good person, but they're not compatible. So what's the point? Why setting them up for failure? Now, how do we make sure that they're compatible, or at least increase the chances of maturity and compatibility, and therefore the chances of success for marriage? Marriage, of course, after maturity and compatibility, it is built on love or affection, mutual respect, and mutual trust. These are the foundations. Two people trust each other, respect each other, love each other, one another, and then comes this point of compatibility. One way to ensure this very early on in our children, to ensure they become mature early and they succeed in selecting their spouse, is to instill in your child a sense of purpose or a sense of mission. Because when someone has a mission in life or a high purpose, that person will know how to choose. They will choose someone who is compatible. But if a child or a young person does not know still what's their purpose in life, what's their calling, what's their mission, they more than likely they will not choose right. They will not choose right. So instilling a sense of mission and purpose in your children early on can help them later on, first mature early, and second make the right choice when it comes to marriage. And of course, setting in your children because as you can see, this building family and parenting are very much related, because it's a cycle. Child is raised and then they go on to build a family. Make sure that you build in your child a set of values and principles they live by. Raising children is not just feeding them and buying them what they need, what they want. Raising children meaning building a personality, shaping up a personality. You know, the athlete, they shape them up, their muscles and all their physical capability. That's what you do to your child, building values and principles and character so that someone can restrain themselves. So even if there are differences, later on they can manage their differences, because there is someone who was built with character and with values and principles, and therefore they don't exceed limits. They don't exceed their limits. So instilling a sense of mission in your children early on, help them mature early, and then making it easy for them. More than likely they will choose, because they're going to choose someone who share with them those values, those principles, and that particular mission or purpose. The other way you can help your children choose right is to facilitate or to build a network of relationships with families who have children at the similar age like yours. That can be very, very helpful. I have seen that can be very helpful in facilitating the right marriage and the right choice. If you have a number of families whose sons and daughters are at similar age like yours, and you have close relationship with them, you are creating the opportunity for people who are compatible to get married, because they were raised in the same network. It becomes like an extended family. You replace the uncles and the aunts that your children are missing because you're living in abroad or in not in the same place that you were raised. You replace those by very close relationship with other families. So I have seen this happening, and I have seen the product also that this step has helped young people get married and succeed, because again they know each other very well, and they are very compatible personalities, and they have that surrounding support network or support environment that can help them once they get married. Now this is about the choice. Once people make the first choice, I'd like all of us to know that choosing a potential partner, that's not a final decision. There is a premarital phase, and families have to be aware of this. When two people say we may get married, that's not the final decision. That's pre-decision, preliminary. So there is a premarital phase in which families and those two people should enter it with the intention or knowing that it may work, may not work, may or may not work. So families have to be aware, and there is no problem if it doesn't work. If these two people, after talking to each other and find that they're not compatible, it's not the end of the world that they say, no, I don't think this is a suitable marriage. So families and young people should enter that phase with the intention and the planning that may or may not work. We're just gonna get to know each other more. And that's why it has to be done right, because it is something that's not a final decision yet. And it should be very common in community and normal that two people thought they are compatible and find out that they're not. It's not the end of the world. It's better than going for a marriage and family that become very dysfunctional and will make so many people suffer because of it. So may or may not work. That should be the intention and the plan. And second, the two people and their families should facilitate open, frank communication. These two people are going to live together. There will be no masks after marriage. So there should be no masks before marriage. All the masks should be dropped. Just be yourself. Say who you are, what you want, what you can tolerate, what you cannot tolerate. It's always better to minimize surprises. I keep hearing this all the time, that after they get married, say, this is not what I thought, or what I expected. Why? Because there was no open and frank communication before. Everybody was putting a mask to impress others, and then when they get married, they find so many surprises. That's not what I thought. That's not what you told me. Or you never told me this. You never told me that's your plan or that's your intention. So try to encourage and facilitate and make it very transparent. Even if your child, your son or your daughter does not say the whole thing, say it. Make sure that it is said, that everything is clear. This is who I am. This is what I want. These are my priorities. That's what I can tolerate and what I cannot tolerate. It's extremely important, this step, if we want these marriages to be successful. Number 3, in this phase, so 1, may or may not work. Should be clear that it's a phase of exploring. It's a potential marriage. It's not a marriage yet. 2, open and frank communications. And 3, reading. Reading, and reading. Please. This is a critical job. These 2 jobs are the most critical jobs that we are doing, we're taking. Being spouse and being a parent. They are much more important, much more crucial than your 9-to-5 job, for which you spend how many years studying, and how many trainings, and how much reading you have done for your job. This is a much more important and much more critical job. Reading. For men to read about women, and for women to read about men. Reading about spousal relationship. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us different, very different, so that we can complement one another. Priorities for men and women are different. The way of thinking is different. Doesn't mean that anyone is better than the other. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created them like this to complement one another. And always remember that the spouse that you're choosing, whom you're choosing, was not custom made for you. You choose because you thought that the positive are greater than outweighs the negative. But they did not made it customized for you. So you're going to have to accept, and never should get rid of this idea that people get married and then they think they're going to change their spouse. Going to change someone after reaching that age, forget it. There is minimum change that you can make. There is minimum adaptation, but you're not going to change the person completely. So make sure that you know that people know that they're not custom made, but you think that this person is the one who is compatible and you can continue your life with. Because I have seen time and again, man wants to make their wife exactly like them, or the way they want, the perfect image they had in their mind, and vice versa. Or women she had a profile for the ideal man, so she wants to change her spouse, her husband, to fit that profile. That's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. So people have to be flexible and ready to compromise. And that's what we're going to talk about after marriage. People have to be ready to compromise and have to be flexible. Now, once the 2 people get married, one thing that I keep recommending for parents, please take your hands off. Hands off this couple. Give them a chance to manage their problems and their differences, because the involvement of parents has always complicated things. Never push them back. When they come to you to talk about their problems, push them back. Encourage them to solve their own problems, because problem between 2, much easier to solve than when 3 people are involved, or 4 or 5. Push them back and encourage them to solve their own problems. This is a mistake that families keep doing. And worse than getting involved is taking siding with their daughter or with their son. So problem was easy to contain becomes much more complicated, because now it involves so many parents, and there is polarization, and people are taking sides. And taking sides a lot of time biased, not even fair. Just go with your son or with your daughter, even if they are the ones that are at fault. So make sure that you push them back, parents push the new couple back and encourage them to solve their own problems. Because then they will find this an alternative. Rather than communicating with one another, everyone goes to their parents and share all the problems or their concerns. But when you push them back, you almost force them to communicate and to solve their problems and their differences. Now, in most cases of failed marriages, most cases that I saw myself, is that man comes out of marriage complaining about lack of respect. And woman comes out of marriage complaining there was lack of emotion. In most cases, you find this trend, that the complaint from man is not respected. The complaint from woman usually, it's not like woman does not care about respect, but usually the main complaint is that there is no emotion. The relationship was allowed to get dry out or to die out. So make sure people, when they get married, they nurture that relationship. Because the relationship is like plant. If you don't take good care of it, it will die out. So nurturing relationships. And in good times, build credits. You know, financially, when you have money, you save so that when you need them, you're not in trouble. In a relationship, it's the same thing. In good times, invest and build credit with your spouse so that when problems happens, there is no overdraft. There is some credit and some saving that is there. So when problems and disputes happen, and they're going to happen, then there is a lot of caution. There is a safety margin and there is a caution, and that's what many people miss. So when things are working, build credits so that when things do not work or a problem happens, there is some caution, there is some saving. As long as there is communication and mutual respect, all problems could be solved. As long as people can, and communication is an art. A lot of us, we don't know how to communicate. Communication is an art. It starts with listening. Listening to understand, and communicate to convince, not to win argument, to find solution. Listen to understand. Try to understand the person and communicate. When you're communicating, you are doing to solve problem, not to blame. I keep seeing this blame game all the time. It's not my fault, it's his, it's hers. Communication should not turn into blame game. We're not in a court to find who's at fault. We are in a family trying to find the solution. So it is not about winning an argument. Because I can see always these disputes between spouses, everyone is trying to prove that the other is at fault. It's not their fault. So what's the point? Once you prove that it's their fault, the problem does not get solved. So listen to understand and communicate to solve problem, and be willing to learn and to change, be flexible to change. It's not the end of the world when you say, sorry, it was my fault. It's not, by the way, it's not a sign of weakness. It's the other way around. Those who admit mistakes are the people who are confident, the people who are strong. Those who are always defensive are the people who are weak. It's not the end of the world to acknowledge that was your mistake. And it's not the end of the world to learn something new, not only from your spouse, from your child. To learn and to change. To change an idea that was in your mind or a habit of yours. That's the kind of flexibility that you should have until you meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Always eager to learn something new and always ready to change to the better. But the other approach is claiming that you are perfect, trying to justify everything that you do, and everything that's not going to work. Nobody is perfect. But a human being, we make mistakes. We just need to acknowledge them and learn from them so that we can improve. So this, as long there is that kind of communication with mutual respect, all problems in the world can be solved. Why? Because one, we can find a compromise. Two, better than that, we can agree, can convince one another. Three, we can agree to disagree. There are issues that we don't have to agree about. We just discuss them once, twice, and it's clearly that we are not able to convince one another. So we agree to disagree. Either convince one another, agree, come to an agreement, come to a compromise, somewhere in between, in the middle, or at least agree to disagree. That's the kind of the results of any communication that is done the right way. And then this first phase of marriage is critical. Why? Because the premarital phase is to decide whether to marry or not. The first phase after marriage is to decide whether to have children or not. Are we going to continue or not? That's also a lot of people are taking it very lightly. So they rush to have children before having that solid foundation. There is a phase in which, after the exploration, premarital, there is another phase. Is this house can support a child or not? Is it solid enough? There are foundations to support, to raise a child, or it's still shaky? These are some tips about building families successfully, and inshallah we'll continue with the other side of the story, which is raising children successfully, especially in that critical transition when they go from a child to a teenager to a young adult. وَتُوبُ إِلَى اللَّهِ إِنَّهُ غَفُورٌ رَحِيمٌ. إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونستهديه ونتوب إليه، نعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا، من يهدي الله فهو المهتد ومن يضلل فلن تجد له وليا مرشدا. Dear respected brother and sister in Islam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَمِنْ آيَاتِهِ أَنْ جَعَلَ لَكُم مِنْ أَنفُسِكُمْ أَزْوَاجًا لِتَسْكُنُوا إِلَيْهَا وَجَعَلَ بَيْنَكُم مَوَدَّةً وَرَحْمَةً إِنَّ فِي ذَلِكَ لَآيَاتٍ لِقَوْمٍ يَتَفَكَّرُونَ. It's an amazing verse about marriage. Another of his signs is that he created spouses from among yourselves. It's part of you. It's a beautiful expression. Created for you spouses from among yourselves. For you both to live in tranquility. That's the purpose. You manage to build a family that live in tranquility, you're successful. You didn't manage to do that, you failed. And there is no point after that to see whom to blame. It's a failure. To live in tranquility. To realize that from now on, your happiness is going to depend on the happiness of your spouse. And the smartest people are the ones who work hard to make their spouse happy, because that's the most effective way for you to be happy. And that's when many people, unfortunately, don't realize. The best, they say, attack is the best defense. In marriages, giving is the most, that's what you gain the most. When you give the most, you gain the most. For you to live in tranquility, He ordained love and kindness between you. He ordained love and kindness between you. There truly are signs in this for those who reflect. وَجَعَلَ بَيْنَكُمْ مَوَدَّةً وَرَحْمَةً. You want to fulfill the purpose of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you build a house when there is where people live in tranquility and when there is a love and kindness. A house that is full of love and kindness. ربنا اتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. اللهم اشف مرضانا وارحم موتانا وتوفنا وانت راض عنا واختم بالصالحات أعمالنا واجعل خير أعمالنا خواتمها وخير أيامنا يوم نلقاك. متعنا اللهم بالنظر إلى وجهك الكريم. ربنا ارحم والدينا كما ربونا صغارا وارحم موتانا وجميع موتى المسلمين. لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك إنا كنا من الظالمين. صلى الله على سيدنا محمد. لا تنسى.